So once again, and very recently, the Communist Party that claimed to represent workers and peasants killed workers and peasants and students to maintain power. And
like I said, could you imagine that timeline shift? Like, these college kids succeeded, and then they restructured China to look more like the United States, and just went on from there. Probably there's so much less bloodshed in the world, to be all honest. Oh yeah, right on the foyer. What's up, everybody? Celtic Scarecrow here. Back with no reaction to get those 10s and 20 views. And I hear myself talking somewhere. Had to hunt myself down. Just restart up the gaming PC. This one. Because I gotta do a reaction for tomorrow, technically. This video. Yeah, I said I was going to do part 2 of Ommpaville, the Appalachia story. I did it. I know I did it. What happened to it, though, I have no idea. So, as you see, I have a cupcake below me. And that's because I'm pretty sure we're going to say the word communist is going to pop. Communism is going to pop so many times we might actually summon the fat electrician. And he has a great way of describing communism. It's basically like, hey, I got this recipe for the greatest cupcake in the world. And it's hilarious from unsub. I don't feel like cutting another clip. So that's why we brought the cupcake from Five Nights at Freddy's. But yes, we are watching Ommpaville again. I said I'll do I'll do part 2. This is now just a new part. And it is the terrifying history of communism. So we don't get scolded by the fat electrician or backhand. He looks like he's about to backhand me. We'll put him away. And we'll go over to here. Of course, the channel logo is above my head. The title is below me. Link to the original video and Oompa's candy. Oompa sells candy. And Oompa didn't go after me for the last video, so I will promote his stuff. Therefore, he can make money. Because God knows I'm not. But that's it. I got the cupcake. Let's go. Take away, Senor. Tell us the terrorists of communism. Also, the day of recording was election day, so that's a common reason why I chose to do it.
This just in, I'm getting a ding ding in my ear. The broadcast that you are about to view has been flagged as treasonous to the Chinese Communist Party. To view this program is to put your social credit score and freedom at risk.
I got this Second Amendment behind me, and I have an excellent credit score. As for social, I am a Penguins fan living in South Jersey. You think I have a social credit score here? I'm also a VTuber now. Yeah, social credit scores is going to be so good.
You have been warned. In 1989, the world watched two futures unfold at once. The Berlin Wall crumbling in Eastern Europe, and in Beijing, tanks rolling over dreams of democracy. It was the moment communism transformed and collapsed in one part of the world while evolving into something far more dangerous in another. And it seems like what we have is the result of one of the most successful censorship campaigns in history. If you don't know what Tiananmen Square is, you will learn, and you will understand that this is not just about remembering the past and talking about a horrific massacre, but also potentially a glimpse into the authoritarian future that we may be facing here in the West.
Yeah, there's a bunch of weirdos that actually want that here. Hey, how about open a history book and show me one location where it worked? And don't tell me it didn't work there. If I have to pull out the Nick Fuh with the helmet on, I will.
And facing a line of troops, the crowd is still here. They're shouting, "Stop the killing and down with the government."
Today's video, we're not just talking about any government. We're talking about the dangers and the horrors of communism. Hopefully, an objective take, by the way. I'm very well aware.
Oh, Oompa, I might have to steal this verified-ish. Well done, sir. Well done.
Of propaganda. So how exactly did we get here? We have to go back to the mid-1800s to see how an ideology rose that would eventually govern 1/3 of humanity at its peak. A specter was haunting Europe, the specter of communism, the Red Tide. In early 1848, Europe was embroiled in a revolution that began in Sicily and quickly spread throughout the continent. The working class were rising against those who took advantage of their hard labor in exchange for nothing. Now, these revolutions did end in total failure, basically all of them. But the revolutions and revolutionaries had a picture painted in their heads of how the world could serve the people who lived upon it, instead of the people serving kings. Two of the most notorious individuals involved in these movements were Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels.
The only thing they got going for them is they have good beards.
Together, the two men published a pamphlet that would go on to reshape human history. It was the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto promised liberation from class struggle, a workers' paradise where exploitation would end forever. It called upon the...
I'm just going to inject my 2 cents. I work at a small family-owned business. The family took a lot of risk in having the business, and then they pay me to work there. If the business were to go under, I face no real risk. I just go get a new job. The family, though, has a lot to risk. So guess what? Capitalism works.
Working men of all countries to unite, for the proletariat, which would be the working class, have nothing to lose but their chains, and they have the world to win. Sounds kind of Jesus-y a little bit. Sounds awesome. Sounds epic. The downtrodden proletariat need to seize the means of production from the bourgeoisie, meaning the business owners and the wealthy, aka the capitalists. Me. I'm a business owner. I have multiple businesses, so I'm...
Yeah, Oompa's very successful. Be like Oompa.
To be honest, but the vision was simple, and that's what made it so intoxicating. The manifesto proposed that society passes through inevitable stages. Systems give birth to tools that are later used to topple that system. And a quote from the pamphlet is, "The weapons with which the bourgeoisie felled feudalism to the ground are now turned against the bourgeoisie itself." Pretty hard quote, TBH. But not only has the bourgeoisie forged the weapons that bring death to itself, it has also called into existence the men who are to wield those weapons, the modern working class, or the proletarians.
So basically, they want the people who are trying to just live a good life, support their family, to not take more risk and potentially become business owners like Oompa, but to hijack Oompa's business and say, no, this is now my business. I get an even share.
Feudalism had spawned capitalism, and capitalism's own contradictions would birth its destroyer. It prophesied that workers would unite, seize the means of production, and create a classless society where the state itself would wither away. But alas, the Communist Manifesto was presented not as wishful thinking, but rather as a scientific certainty, the iron laws of history made manifest. Modern bourgeoisie society, with its relations of production, of exchange, and of property, a society that has conjured up such gigantic means of production and of exchange, is like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the powers of neither world whom he has called up by his spells, which is a really cool, fun wizard way to describe what they believed. And this utopian vision for the future would become corrupted into a grimdark version of itself in 1917. And we'll
Then every version of it gets grim and dark.
get to that, okay? Because you've probably seen a lot of communist people who are like, I'm communist, I like the hammer and the sickle.
I'm just waiting for the fat electrician to pop up.
And I just want people to, I don't really want to be rich, and I don't really want to. Frankie's very cap. She's a huge cap.
Frankie's just trying to prevent the fat electrician from popping up and smacking him beside the head.
She's like an oligarch. All right, she's a Russian oligarch. She likes getting whipped with those bushes. Can you stop being so excited and having so much fun with your life all the time? You're gonna attack me. Stop.
Swear, we can't get Oompa and Molly in the same location in their pug obsession.
Enter a fellow by the name of Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, known to the world as Lenin. This man transformed Marx's theory into a blood-soaked reality. For Lenin, this began in 1887 when he was only 17 years old. His brother was executed for planning to assassinate the Tsar of Russia at the time, which was...
Okay, that's a... Treason is a good reason why that might have happened.
Emperor Alexander III. Russian politics became a fixation of Lenin's, and while at school, he began reading radical literature. And one author that Lenin became fond of was Karl Marx. Karl was dead over 30 years at this point, but his work had infiltrated the mind of the man who would become the first head of the Soviet state. But that was still to come, obviously. This is the 1800s. Lenin devoted himself to the communist revolution, but made a crucial modification to Marx's vision. Workers wouldn't spontaneously develop revolutionary consciousness. They needed a vanguard party, or an intellectual elite that understood the direction of history and would guide society along its predetermined path.
Oh, so basically, a king. Hey, the workers will all unite under one person. It's a monarchy with extra steps.
Basically, the failure of all this stuff, because people suck. This vanguard party that Lenin would come to lead would be known as the Bolsheviks, or the Russian Communist Party. So skipping forward to October 25th, 26th, 1917. The Bolsheviks seized power in Petrograd, which is now St. Petersburg, here on a map in Russia. It was the first...
I never understood why they changed the name. Like from Petrograd to St. Petersburg. Yeah, it makes it easier for someone like me to say who butchers names, but I like hockey. I had to learn to pronounce Evgeny Malkin is not that hard, but still. I learned to pronounce hockey players' names.
First successful Marxist coup or revolution in history. Within weeks, Lenin created the Cheka, which were the secret police that would become the blueprint for every communist terror apparatus to follow. And opposition parties were banned. The workers' liberation that Marx had imagined became in practice a military dictatorship by party leaders who claimed to speak for workers while actually silencing their voices and sticking them in gulags. So basically,
monarchy with extra steps.
Immediately, this pamphlet idea, wishful thinking thing was turned rotten and sour by a dick. And knowing this, it was always so confusing to me seeing people being like, I love communism. I just equated it to that. I equated communism 100% to just how bad the examples of communism we have are or were. The primary example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you find a country that has communism that's successful. And their citizens have freedoms to post on Twitter.
So obviously there's probably small examples that I don't know of that are fine or whatever in like small groups, but I just...
Communism works in a household. Like parents. Hey, they work. They distribute the means to make sure everyone stays happy. Once you get past that, it doesn't work.
Thought that these people were evil. They had like a hammer and sickle in their bio and stuff. I'm like, yeah, you're crazy. Why would you believe that? But I get it. I mean, you just want to not be a slave to a system that you have zero control over. I mean, totally same, brother. But I don't know if it works because you have to have somebody really powerful to implement it, and then that person will almost always be corrupted and be evil and create a secret police and then send you to a gulag when you speak out, which is bad, and then kill you. The warning signs for the Bolshevik Revolution were...
Nobody needs to work on his mustache. I haven't seen a later video, but he could have a good mustache, but it's a little lacking.
Were immediate and completely unmistakable. In a thought experiment, Lenin proposed a conflict between a military and police dictatorship over the people and a dictatorship of the revolutionary people. And in this example, he uses the real arrest, torture, and exile of social revolutionary Maria Spiridonova by militant Cossacks led by P.F. Avramov to justify his use of revolutionary terror. This is the quote. When the Avramov and Cossacks torture Spiridonova, that is military and police dictatorship over the people. When the revolutionary people resort to force against Avramov and the Avramovs, that is dictatorship of the revolutionary people. It is dictatorship because it is the authority of the people over Avramov, an authority unrestricted by laws.
Yeah, I've heard better Russian accents, but...
So essentially, Lenin believed himself and his fellow Bolsheviks were so righteous that the ends justified the means, and that in pursuit of this vision, they were above the law, which is what every great leader of the 20th century believed and did. Literally all of them. The Red Terror was a campaign to crush counter-revolution. It was launched in 1918 and by 1921 had silenced nearly all opposition. Even...
Yeah, whenever I see this on a political sign, not a good thing. Skulls be cool and logos and stuff, but yeah, if you add politics to a skull, not good.
Socialist Revolutionary Party members, champions of the peasantry, were dragged into Cheka basements and stuffed into gulags. The SRP had even held a majority and was the largest political party in the 1917 Constituent Assembly before Lenin dissolved it and began his revolution. So the socialists were everywhere, and these socialist revolutionaries on paper could have been allies to the communist revolution. Both the Bolsheviks and the socialists fought against the old aristocratic order in favor of socialism, but slight, very minute differences turned them into rivals instead of partners, which is
Yeah, one socialism and the other one dictatorship. Granted, socialism is just never going to work anyway because, you know, if you just have majority of rule, you just vote wherever way you want.
so f***ed up. And I think that's one of the things where it's like, man, this is really bad. You know? It's kind of where I'm like, that is bad. You know what I'm saying, guys? It's like really nuanced, and you need to have like a lot of media literacy to get it. But anyways, the Bolsheviks were focused on a revolution of industrial workers, and they wanted to seize power so that they could transform society from the top down. Socialist revolutionaries fought for the peasant base of Russia's population, which was a massive 80% of its people. They saw the peasants as the actual revolutionary class, where the socialists who fought for the peasant class had failed in Russia. They were successful elsewhere. For example, Mao Zedong's Peasant Revolution, the same year in July of 1921, which was the roots of another communist party, took hold in China. 13 men gathered in...
Ooh, Mao. You want body count? Mao's up there.
Shanghai to establish the Chinese Communist Party, also known as the CCP, still going today. Among them was a librarian's assistant named Mao Zedong, who would adapt communism yet again, and this time for a nation of peasants and not industrial workers. So you've got some similarities in Russia of the two parties, but you've got the Red Terror pushing the damn socialists out, and then the socialist foothold kind of takes place with the peasant class in China, and then they form the Chinese Communist Party, and there you have Mao. I'm sure you've probably heard of Mao. He's kind of known for he having a lot of sex with women. He's known for that. He's literally known for that. And stinking.
He's also a character in Civ Rev that I play during halftime football games.
I've heard he's known for stinking as well. And they're all known for sending their children to be killed. All these leaders are. Mao's innovation was heretical to orthodox Marxists, which is the funniest sentence I've ever said in my life. Revolution would not come from the factories, but rather the fields. And it wasn't that Mao was particularly fond of peasants. In fact, he viewed them as ignorant and dirty, but he recognized that they had revolutionary potential because of their numbers and their willingness to stab people with pitchforks, I guess. But
Mob rule.
the CCP had been operating as a study group within the Nationalist Party, and Chinese communists had even joined the Nationalist Army during the Northern Expedition in 1926 and 1927 to remove warlords who were impeding China's centralization. That was until the White Terror in 1927.
I wonder what happened if those warlords actually just teamed up and took them out. China probably wouldn't be as big. And
During which nationalists turned on communists, killing them or purging them from the party, and the CCP was almost completely annihilated by this point. And up until that point, Mao had been the head of the propaganda department of the Nationalist Party, and now Mao retreated to the countryside, building support among peasants again with land reform promises. This evolved into a...
yeah, he always had that hairstyle, though. You can clearly tell that's Mao right there. But yeah, sure, land reform. Now they don't. The peasants in that area don't even allowed to own land.
Civil war in China between the nationalists and the communists. The nationalists launched 5 campaigns against the communists who used guerrilla tactics under the leadership of Mao. And 4 of the 5 campaigns were repelled under Mao's leadership, but still, the 5th one was so extreme that difficulties and losses led to Mao being temporarily replaced when the communists were encircled and suffered losses due to attrition. Then we skip a bit to the Long March of 1934 and 35, which was a breakout from the nationalist encirclement, during which a retreating force of 86,000 men was reduced to 4,000 over the course of traveling 6,000 miles. But they ultimately succeeded in escaping their pursuers and making their leader a legend. It transformed defeat into mythology and established Mao as the movement's undisputed leader and inspired thousands to join the Red Army of Mao. And this man...
there's a few points in history where you go back and just say, let's take this person out right here. And, like, oh, they were doing a lot of okay things at this point, then they just, like, take them out. So you don't take out the mustache man as a baby. Take him out as, like, in World War One.
Japan's position was further strengthened during the Japanese invasion of China, which you can check out some information in regard to that from our last video, which was about Unit 731 and the evils of.
If you want me to react to that Ommpaville video, let me know in the comment section down below.
The Japanese people during World War II. Fighting Japanese invaders gave Chinese communists a patriotic legitimacy, and Mao's forces appeared disciplined and incorruptible. His guerrilla warfare doctrine, quoted as, "The enemy advances, we retreat. The enemy camps, we harass." It proved devastatingly effective. After the Japanese were eventually defeated during World War II, the Chinese Civil War.
Thanks to capitalism, bitches, we spawned the sun on them twice.
War between nationalists and communists resumed in 1945, but still the communists would win 4 years later, with Mao Zedong serving as the chairman of the People's Republic of China all the way until 1976. And during that reign, that guy dicked down a bunch of Chinese gals, all right? He was swinging it, all right? He was swinging it left, swinging it right. Anyways, this communist development in China was one step in the descent of the Iron Curtain. Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video. You ever notice how it's always the boring health stuff that we put off the longest? Like finally getting that severe back pain checked out, or even potentially getting that physical primary care visit you've been avoiding for years because you're scared, little guy. The truth is, most of what makes you not want to go is because the system to get there is a pain. That's why I use ZocDoc. It is a free app and website that makes finding the right doctor ridiculously simple. You can search across more than 100,000 in-network doctors and find everything from dermatology experts, mental health experts, to urgent care and dentals. You can get your teeth fixed. You plug in your insurance, you see verified reviews from actual patients, and you can book instantly. No calling, no, "I need help!" Most appointments are ready within a couple of days, and a lot are even same day. I've used ZocDoc myself specifically to go to the dentist for the first time in a long time. And it genuinely takes the stress out of healthcare. And if I can do it, you can too. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments, my friend. Go to zocdoc.com/Ommpaville to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That is zocdoc.com/Ommpaville. ZocDoc.com/Ommpaville, or click the link in the description.
That's the first time I actually seen a ZocDoc anything. So. Hey, if he's not going to go after me for copyright claim for reacting to his video and learning, I'm going to let him get his free plugin.
Back to Russia. Where Lenin had brought communism to Russia, Stalin was going to expand it beyond the nation's borders. Stalin's Red Army didn't just defeat Nazi Germany, it delivered half of Europe into communist hands. And Stalin's takeover followed a sinister pattern later called...
Also, we're going to back up. Russia did not defeat it. The Allies did. The dude was on his side for the start of it and then bailed because of, Lenin.
Salami tactics, which is a very funny phrase, but it's not. It's slicing away opposition piece by piece, bit by bit, using all of the poor Christians you possibly can as fodder. Coalition governments that worked with Soviet Russia initially included non-communist governments, but over time, communists consistently gained control of the police, the military, and interior ministries, effectively eliminating all opposition through terror, murder, and corruption. I don't think it is exactly what was
So, standard communist practice. Okay.
planned. It's not the whole wishful thinking utopian society. It's more so evil military dictatorships just killing and destroying everybody. And they did some epic stuff too. Like, to be honest, all the moon stuff, and there was a lot of cool, I mean, I'm sure there was really cool inventions. I don't know of any.
Yeah. We didn't get the AK out of it. We did get that. Space race, that was also good. But like I said, all this communist stuff just keeps reminding the same thing. It is a monarchy with extra steps.
In all honesty, I don't really know of any because I'm, like massively psyoped by my government. But I've learned recently, and by that I mean over my entire life, that everything that I learned from school is just not real. If it has to do with computers, it's real, or maybe about writing, it's real. Universal human experiences, I think, are very real, but anything history related, hey man, I'm just gonna be real with you. They say it's written by the victors. I think it's written by the victors, and also money. Money has a lot to do with it, too, as well. I'm starting to put those two things together. I think it's my extreme level of media literacy, though. Let's ask the Arnuki Beast what he thinks. He's not too talkative today.
I can't tell if that's him putting on the voice of the pugs in the background. That heavy ass breathing.
Just kind of making a weird moaning sound. It's kind of odd. A little strange. Sorry. Press like for the Arnuki Beast. Also go to gump.club to watch behind the scenes footage of videos on my channel. Oh yeah, and also sour.gg. I have a candy company. A lot of you are new.
Yeah, I have a link to his candy company down below because, you know, like I said, if he's going to let me do this, I'm going to plug his stuff.
I have a candy company. I make candy. And it's not like a normal influencer candy company where
I want the pug to attack that thing.
it's just bullshit and they just white label stuff. It's the way we make it. We have our own recipe of sour strip. And it's incredible. It's really good. Get some for Halloween. Get some for Halloween. We also do 4 new flavors a month, which nobody else does as well, by the way. Just in case you were wondering. But it is capitalist, though, so if you don't like that, then, you know, I get it. Anyways, these tactics of murder, corruption, terror, and horror overall, which
It sounds like basic communism.
the Americans never used, ever. That's just not a thing. These tactics were used to gain control of several European nations. For example, my favorite, Albania. Several European nations. For example, my favorite.
All right. Let's look. This one right here, Czechoslovakia. Yeah, that divide into Slovakia and the Czech Republic. Now it's just Chechi. Correct. Just remember, this is the country that Jaromir Jagr was born in, and he's been alive. He's been playing hockey longer than the country's been, like a country type thing. It's Jagr has a very weird history. Of course, you have Poland, Romania, Eastern Germany, and West Germany, of course. Albania.
This beautiful little country held an election with only communist candidates, which is very funny. Bulgaria, another funny little country. They arrested non-communists, terrorized citizens, and held rigged elections. Poland, 500,000 Red Army occupants tried non-communist leaders for treason in Moscow before elections in 1947. Then the Red Army left.
Sounds a lot like Seattle and Portland right now.
Romania, they arrested opposition and forced the poor king to abdicate. Oh, he had to renounce his title. Hungary, pro-Russian communists ousted non-communists after taking over the government, press, and military bodies with their secret police, the AVO. Czechos.
Also, Bulgaria. This is where Rusev is from, or Miro, wrestler.
Slovakia! They conducted a coup and assassinated the son of the first president, who was the nation's leading political holdout against communism. East Germany was directly controlled by the Soviets because of their anal beating of the Nazis during World War II. It was directly controlled by them. It was the division of Germany into communist East and democratic West that inspired Churchill to coin the term the Iron Curtain. That is what everybody has known. The Iron Curtain.
God, he would do so well as like a Jim Carrey impersonation. I know it's not off topic, but
Cold War has begun. The Iron Curtain has fallen. Communists have taken over Lego City. Communism, by either embrace or by force, was exploding across the world. The utopian promise had spread from Marx's London exile to encompass.
that's basically a king. He's basically was a king.
Billions of people. Workers would rule at last. Equality would reign, and history itself would end in a communist paradise. The appeal.
These guys look like they have guns and are threatening somebody off camera. They all do have guns. I do see it now. But they don't like firearms, because then you can overthrow them once they're in charge.
Was absolutely undeniable. Who could realistically argue against ending exploitation? Who could think that that's a bad thing? Who could argue against workers controlling their own destiny, or at least more so? Who could argue against scientific laws promising inevitable justice? Millions of idealists worldwide embrace communism's promise of human liberation, but from the beginning, the practice diverged from the promise, obviously, because human beings.
Also, like, the thing of the Red Scare in the United States, I'm not sure if Oompa's going to get into this, where if you want a good example of that, watch the movie The Majestic. It's a great kind of compilation of, like, everything that kind of happened with the Red Scare in America, where basically it'd be like, I'm not a communist. Ommpaville's the communist. I saw him at a party. He was going there. He hooked up with this Russian chick. And she was 100% communist. And then they would leave me alone and then go harass Oompa. And Oompa like, what? No. It was call me Chris. She's communist. And that's how that little thing went. They just kept chasing people around. If you don't know, Oompa is dating or married to it's called me Chris. She's also very hilarious.
Are pieces of dog shit. Every communist revolution immediately led to the establishment of single-party states, and each established a secret police. Each then claimed a temporary dictatorship that somehow never came to an end, and the vanguard party meant to guide workers to freedom became their new master. The state that would wither away as a result of communism taking the reins would then grow more potent than any Tsar or emperor could ever dream. It was ultimate authoritarianism, just the least amount of control versus the most amount of control. It's
like I said, monarchy with extra steps.
Very ironic, to be honest. While this was all happening, a lot of people had no idea what was actually going on in some instances behind the curtain. The human cost of communism has been absolutely extraordinary. Under the spread of communism, where people should have been thriving, they were dying en masse. Take, for example, the Holodomor. After first declaring...
What? Oh, look, it's Ukraine. Why do I see Ukraine and Russia in the same sentence again? And then I always think bad.
During independence in 1918, Ukraine fell to the Bolshevik Red Army after a 3-year war from 1918 to 1921.
Russia couldn't do it this second time. It's been way more than 3 years.
And immediately, Ukraine's agricultural resources were going to be almost entirely redirected to the USSR, which caused an economic collapse of Ukraine.
God, that sounds just like what's going on right now.
Ukraine, if you didn't know, is a beautiful, resource-dense country with a ton of agriculture. And I don't know if you've ever played Total War or Civilization, but places that are, they have a lot of stuff in the little fertile ground and stuff, you take that and you send it everywhere else. All right, that's just like rule number 1. That's how you do it, man. But where what we do in video games kind of differs is that Stalin rounded up Ukrainian thought leaders, church leaders, and even...
Yeah, that was like the one issue that they always had issues with. But they would round up all the people, the farmers that would run the land, and then more or less eliminate them, put in their people in there who didn't know how to farm. You're kind of seeing this in Africa right now. And... next thing you know, the farms aren't as productive.
Pro-Ukraine Communist Party members.
It'd be like me, like giving motorcycle lessons. I'd never ridden a motorcycle.
For execution, and then had them executed. He then enacted collectivization, declaring all of Ukraine's agricultural resources to be state-controlled entirely, and any who resisted was declared an enemy of the state. For example, if you had a farm, if you were a farmer in Ukraine and you didn't want to give all your food away and you wanted to eat some of it, you're an enemy of the state. What? And this is where the horrors began. Between 1932 and
this is where the horrors always begin.
1933, in Soviet Ukraine, Stalin weaponized hunger. While extracting 4.27 million tons of grain, which is enough to feed 12 million people, the Soviet state sealed its borders to prevent starving peasants from seeking food. There was a 5 stalks of grain rule that was decreed, ensuring that anyone who took produce from a collectivized field would be executed or imprisoned for stealing socialist property. The number of deaths resulted...
Do you want to point out something that's scary about that? And I hit the wrong button. Even children So hungry kids could be taken out like that.
Field would be executed or imprisoned for stealing socialist property. The number of deaths resulting from the widespread famine, which historians believe was deliberate, ranges in estimates. Some estimates put the death
Dang.
toll at 3.5 million to 7 million, while the Holodomor memorial page on the National Park Service website says anywhere from 7 million to 10 million. Personal testimonies on the memorial site detail the horror that was experienced by those who were victims of the famine and those who imposed it. Antonina Melashenko was from a village in the region of Kiev and said this: "The famine began. People were eating cats and dogs. In the Rose River, all the frogs were caught out. Children were gathering insects in the fields and died swollen. Stronger..."
It's one of those things, like one, family pets, but once you start taking out like the bugs, the frogs, things that help grow food, it's going to cause, it's a ripple effect.
Peasants were forced to collect the dead to the cemeteries, and they were stocked on the carts like firewood and dropped off in one big pit. The dead were all around, on the roads, near the river, by the fences. I used to have 5 brothers. Altogether, 792 souls have died in our village during the famine. In the war years, 135 souls. Here's the Holodomor described by Viktor Kravchenko, a former Soviet official who defected. What I...
Oh, the balls on this dude to defect. Like, it was one thing to stand up, but if you're going to be like, I'm bailing, and you live to see it, well done.
saw that morning was inexpressibly
Also, Oompa, your slides are off, by the way. Just saying.
horrible. On a battlefield, men die quickly. They fight back. Here, I saw people dying in solitude by slow degrees, dying hideously without the excuse of sacrifice for a cause. They had been trapped and left to starve, each in his own home, by a political decision made in a far-off capital around conference and banquet tables. There was not even the consolation of inevitability to relieve the horror. At its peak, during the Holodomor, 28,000 Ukrainians died a
That was a good dude, but I don't know. Bad time joke.
day. 1/3 of those who died were children under the age of 10, and meanwhile, Moscow rejected international aid offers and continued exporting grain for hard currency while entire villages were blacklisted, surrounded by troops, and their residents trapped to starve. But of course, after this, Stalin wasn't done killing those under his rule.
ERB, Stalin versus Rasputin. Georgia, sweet Georgia.
We've already established how in many of these socialist movements where it's kind of about the good of the people, different sects develop and then they cannibalize each other, and or they're purged by allies or different groups. It's very human. It happened between the Bolsheviks and the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Nationalists, purging Mao socialists and then pursuing them relentlessly. But the Great Terror saw Joseph Stalin turn on the very Communist Party that Lenin had led to power. It was a brutal political campaign that would see the purging of dissenting members of the Communist Party.
Christ, 2/3 of the photo he blurred. I wonder if from Pepperbox it's not blurred. I wouldn't air it here because, you know, I'm not going to break the paywall across there.
He even crippled his own military before the outset of World War II when he believed they were plotting a coup. 30,000 members of the Red Army, including 81 out of 103 generals and admirals, were executed. This
is why the Finnish the Finnish White Death guy. That's how he was so productive. He was just taking out high ranking. He took out everybody, but it's like every time they had a sense of a new after him, they were so not equipped for it because they were not experienced.
is the communist trope of erasing people from photos. Stalin literally did that. Anyone who was seen as a legitimate rival or even a potential future rival was killed immediately. Anyone who was a critic of Joseph Stalin was executed. People who praised his mustache were given godhood. He did have a pretty cool mustache. Included among the victims were many of the old Bolsheviks who would be found guilty of treason before execution. So many of the people he started this shit with, it's crazy.
But that's sorry. Hey, you can see the cool background that AC drew for me. But yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like you rise up and they want to strip away your Second Amendment rights. Therefore, you can't rise up against them when they start, trying to corrupt everything.
The 20th century is just, It's maddening how we're very lucky right now to have a system where not that many people die, or maybe we're not. I don't know, guys. Seems like violence changes things, but at the same time, for the better or for the worse, I don't have any idea. Now, I'm not saying anything, by the way. I'm not saying anything crazy, nothing like that. I'm just looking at Petey right now. And she's real ugly. Millions were sent to labor camps, and conservative estimates put the death toll at 750,000, while some experts believe the figure should be twice as high. These people...
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. When you look at Stalin-era Russia, like, the death toll and all that stuff would rival the German Workers' Party of the 40s. Like, the numbers of people who unfortunately lost their lives to those two is enormous.
Or pure evil. The Great Terror's purpose wasn't just to eliminate opposition, it was making opposition unthinkable and untenable. These numbers are staggering, but they pale in comparison to the suffering in China during Mao's Great Leap Forward. So,
oh yeah, Mao beats both of them combined. Ooh.
There's a consistent theme here. You've got the working class who gets to feel a little bit better, but then anybody else who has a thought, who has any kind of thought indifference, they're just killed. If you're a rich Ukrainian with a farm, you just starve. The worst famine in human history occurred from 1959 to 1961 under Mao Zedong in his pursuit of a perfect communist state. It was called...
Yep. Oh, this is going to be bad. I forget the number, but it is up there. Especially since you've got to remember, like, China always had like a massive population. Yeah, he shrank that number a lot.
The Great Leap Forward, but it cost China 30 to 45 million people who died from starvation, which is unbelievable. Though that is such a high number that it is hard to even comprehend what that means or anything. The Great Leap Forward was doomed from the absolute start. It was modeled from the Soviet Union's plan that resulted in the mass famines in Ukraine.
Yeah, he realized if you take out the people who would want to revolutionize up against you, they can't do that.
So there was already an amazing example of just what the not to do and how to destroy people's lives. Mao started the collectivization of agricultural land in the countryside, which slowly morphed private plots into massive communal fields. At this point, the Industrial Revolution...
AKA taking the farmlands away from the farmers who knew how to work them properly.
...was being forced into the countryside, where farmers were made to split their time between tending crops and manufacturing steel. So farmers who had no experience producing metal built millions of backyard furnaces and produced the most dog shit quality steel that ever existed and was completely unusable because they weren't trained properly, and it's nonsense. At the same time, they were...
Also, think of if they just would sell those, like, just the raw resource to anybody who knew how to do it, they would have pretty good steel and would have made a butt ton of money.
Making the most dog shit steel ever, their crops were dying and precious seeds were wasted in the most idiotic way. For example...
Also, you gotta figure, if you're making seeds, you're burning stuff, so the air quality, the water quality, pollution levels would probably get high, which means the quality of the crops would also go down.
Example, like dumping all your seeds into a swimming pool-sized hole. Good job, communists. Good job, Chinese communists. They were making pig iron from the only metal around, which were utensils, doorknobs, shovels, and everyday items that were actually useful. They took things that were actually useful and turned it into dog shit steel. So with the time split between the mandatory steel making and the collectivization of fields and the lack of care to crops, starvation began quickly. This is a real quote, by the way. And this guy is so wise and philosophically, I mean, listen to this. When there is not enough to eat, people starve to death.
No shit.
It is better to let half of the people die so that the other half can eat their fill.
God, isn't that Thanos' whole BS logic going on there?
That doesn't sound very communist or socialist. That sounds kind of like the opposite. That sounds like kind of evil and like not good. The reality was that the catastrophe was setting back China's economy by at least a decade. And
yeah, because you figure you had resources to make bad steel that no one would want to buy, and B, all the crops that you could have, fed your people and sold the excess off for profit also was just withering away.
Their propaganda machine was churning away, however. Remember, Mao was the Nationalist Party's Chinese propagandist epic winner. China told the world that it was stronger than ever, while tens of millions withered away. And
God, just think if any country would have invaded during that stretch of time, they would have steamrolled that country. Just by offering the citizens, join us, we'll give you food.
Died. Look how bountiful their harvests look in this propaganda poster. Fairly awesome, guys. Absolute unbelievable travesty. And we will never know the actual extent of what genuinely happened. Now on to Pol Pot, a communist from...
Pol Pot, he has another high body count. Man, these communist leaders have body counts that rival OnlyFans models.
Cambodia that was also horrible. Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge held power in Cambodia for only 45 months, from April 1975 to January 1979. But in that time, they killed 2 million people, roughly 1/4 of the nation's population.
A fourth of the nation took it out in 45 months? Damn.
This is the nation of Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge was a communist regime that conquered the capital, murdered the nation's prior officials, and then stripped every right from its citizenry. There were no civil or political rights, no property rights, no religious rights. They even banned the use of money, minority languages, and foreign clothing.
God, I'm seeing a trend of something happening now in, certain bean on toast loving country. Nah, that can't. History won't repeat itself. Again.
The regime emptied cities at gunpoint, including the capital Phnom Penh, as soldiers marched millions of people into the countryside and enslaved them. They were made to dig canals and tend crops, but still people died from starvation. Again, in just 45 months, 1 in 4 people had died as a direct result of the communist regime that took power in Cambodia. And like we said, this happened in the 70s, so many of the survivors are still alive. With how recent the Cambodian genocide was, there are many testimonies reveal the extent of the horror, with single survivors being left to bury their parents as well as their children. So the picture that communism paints from the 20th century looks pretty bleak. Academic estimates place communism's total death toll between 85 and 110 million, with the
I think that's a low number. I think it should be higher than that.
The Soviet Union claiming 61 million and China claiming between 45 and 70 million. Those numbers are so large that it's inconceivable, and it's
I still don't believe that, and I still think they're lowballing that number too.
Important to remember that these are more than just large numbers. These are people who laughed, loved, dreamed, and who died or were killed.
These are probably people who probably could really have helped out their country and potentially the world.
For those reasons, they had all been promised or were swept into the idea of a paradise on earth, but were delivered hell, or the closest thing to it in the 20th century. The communist pattern never varied. You seize power, promise liberation, eliminate opposition as enemies of the people, create terror that's so absolute that resistance becomes unimaginable or untenable, and from Moscow to Beijing, from Phnom Penh to Havana, the workers' paradise.
Havana, Cuba. I was wondering when they would get down to the Western Hemisphere, because, doing so well for herself down there, Cuba.
Required endless graves to maintain. So how
It's not like people are swimming through shark-infested water to escape it.
How does all of this build up into the massacre of Tiananmen Square? What is the massacre of Tiananmen Square? In the midst of Cambodia's communist rule in China, the man who led them through the Great Leap Forward and killed tens of millions of people, Mao Zedong, would die. Then after Mao's death, Chinese Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping gambled on China's future. He bet the prosperity of the nation on a dangerous proposition. Maybe they could have economic freedom without political freedom. It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, so long as it catches mice. In 1979, the United States and the People's Republic of China established a diplomatic relation on the back of Xiaoping's ideas for economic reform. Markets were opened, foreign investment flowed, and for a decade, a cultural exchange took place between the two nations for the first time. The West was open to the East. or vice versa. The East was open to the West. And this is with a downward steady trend of the Soviet Union as well, with it ultimately.
Yeah, once, people actually have realized, hey, we could make something we're good at, we can do it. I don't know. Let's just say you're good at, painting or making pottery, which is something that you see over that side. And these Americans want to buy it and give me money. I turn that money into food and better shelter for my family. I like this capitalist idea.
Culminating with the Gulag Archipelago being written, Alexander, and then 1991 in the fall, and so on. But during this period, China experienced growth that seemed miraculous. The economy was booming, and the Chinese people were exposed to foreign ideas and standards of living. They were seeing prosperity of mind,
freedom, and happiness. Too bad it didn't work.
And money.
Didn't work there.
But prosperity brought problems that Deng had not foreseen. Inflation ate away at fixed incomes, and corruption flourished as officials discovered the rewards of capitalism. Most dangerously, economic opening exposed Chinese citizens to what the CCP viewed as dangerous foreign ideas.
Your own private land, your own protection, happiness.
Ideas like democracy, human rights, and freedom.
The human rights one. I knew I was forgetting something.
In late 1986 and early 1987, student-led demonstrations called for individuals to be granted more rights and freedoms similar to those outlined in Western countries, and specifically the United States Constitution. So the cost of a boom...
We want freedom of speech. We want freedom of religion, because at that time, I think China had a high Christianity rate. And, that Second Amendment is not bad for keeping everything else available to us.
The booming economy with America as your primary trade partner appeared to be corruption on all sides. The Chinese government was corrupted by greed and personal gain in the new booming economy. And the government also couldn't stand to see its citizens corrupted by Western ideology and demands for individual rights.
And happiness. You can't be happy.
By 1989, China's leadership was split down the middle. We had reformers like Hu Yaobang, the general secretary.
Hu Yaobang? That's a great question. Who did Yaobang? Yaobang, a lot of chicks in New York.
Of the CCP believing that political liberalization must happen in accompaniment with further economic reform. Hu Yaobang was a close ally of Deng Xiaoping and had even participated in the Long March of 1934 and 1935, which had transformed Mao Zedong into a folk hero. But unlike Mao, Hu was more pragmatic and led anti-corruption campaigns. He was a smart guy, and he wasn't about that pussy and that's it, like Mao.
See, there's another one of those things. Imagine if that guy took over instead of Yao. Like, how different. The communists might have still taken over, but under his leadership, it might have been a little bit safer, or I don't know how to say that, more closer to its actual ideology and promoting the workers.
Mao was. Hardliners obviously feared losing control and wanted to suppress bourgeoisie liberalism among the CCP, which was precisely what Hu Yaobang was promoting, as it was only encouraging the growing protests and showing activists that they had sympathizers in the government. It's absolutely fascinating turns of events. Both sides...
Something tells me that man wasn't going to live that much longer in that timeline.
The backing of Deng, but Deng wavered. He was on the fence, trying to harness capitalism's economic potential without succumbing to the disorder of democracy. Ultimately, Hu Yaobang was forced to resign in 1987, so the past...
Never mind.
was still winning at this point, and the sequence of events that culminated in the infamous Tiananmen Square incident would begin with Hu Yaobang's death 2 years later in 1989.
I'll say, I knew he wasn't going to be that much longer. Also, if he's staying with Mao, he would have been close to about 80 years old at this stretch of time anyway.
This catalyzed the movement and provided them with a martyr who died championing the cause of political liberalization in the CCP. Hu died of a heart attack while...
Imagine if China would have had a similar things like the United States has, where it's each province and regions had their own kind of governors and stuff. They just looked at America and went, we're going to rip their model off and see how it works for us.
Attending a meeting discussing education reform, and he was the reformist leader whom the government had purged for being too sympathetic to student protesters. He was kind of a badass, kind of a good guy. The monument to the people's heroes in the heart of Tiananmen Square would see massive crowds gather to celebrate Yaobang, where police were ordered to clear the square ahead of an official memorial service. But still, they showed restraint, possibly because they were sympathetic to the students, or perhaps because they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1.
Yeah, that's one thing about China. There's always going to be way more people than armed forces, unless you force them into your army.
Impressive is the fact that in a country with state-controlled media that there's any footage at all of these protests, but it was well timed by the demonstrators. Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union during this time, was
Gorbachev actually was okay with capitalism coming in. Like, he did let China in. He did let a British government, ERB, Rasputin versus Stalin. Go watch it. It's very historical. But yeah, he let like McDonald's in. He loved Pepsi. Somehow gave Pepsi a ship. That from the fat electrician. And he kind of was like trying to, like, he took the slight other route that China could have taken.
Was visiting China on May 15th through the 18th, and even Soviet news would say China had lost control. News crews from around the world were present for the meeting of the two most prominent communist state leaders, which is why there are hours of footage and news reports documenting the protests before, during, and after the USSR visit. They just couldn't hide it. The Chinese demonstrators and protesters wanted to embarrass their leaders on the world stage with large gatherings in defiance of state orders, because what could the government possibly do against a movement that would swell to over 1 million people literally protesting in the streets? Nothing. The students demonstrating had just 7.
You know, sad thing is a lot of those students still probably live there, and they're still not fixing it because they're now probably the age of the people who should be in charge.
Demands of the government, though anyone familiar with how these things go would recognize that every single one of them was too tall an order for the CCP to oblige. They wanted to affirm Hu Yaobang's views as correct on democracy and freedom. Essentially, they wanted the government to say Hu Yaobang was right, which is blasphemy. Then they wanted the government to admit that campaigns against spiritual pollution and bourgeoisie liberalization had been wrong. They wanted them to publish information on the income of state leaders and their family members. And they
Ooh. Oh, and you thought people saying we wanted Trump's tax returns was ballsy. That
wanted to end the ban on privately run newspapers and permit freedom of speech in communist-controlled China. Also, they wanted increased funding for education and raise intellectuals' pay. They also
basically they wanted to be America. That's what it sounds like. They just wanted to be America.
Also wanted to end
United States of China. Could have got the USC. That would have been cool.
Restrictions on demonstrations in Beijing and hold democratic elections to replace government officials who made bad policy decisions. Not a single thing I think any of us disagree with at all.
God, imagine being in that timeline. You have like USSR falling. You have China basically becoming the United States of China. Their own country, not part of the USA, but just like how much the world could have really grown if China went the American route.
Very bad
at this time frame.
Very red-pilled demonstrators in China. The demonstrators wanted these demands broadcast by government-controlled media outlets and for the government to respond quickly. Peaceful pro-democracy demonstrations were breaking out all over China. The capital, Beijing, was subjected to the largest, but the bandwagon was growing as people from all walks of life began protesting even over 1,000 miles away from the heart of the movement. The bright and intelligent young people who would become China's future were applying the most pressure, and everyone else joined in support of the students believing in their cause. Some even believed in the cause, but knew that the opposition and the CCP wouldn't put up with this kind of unrest for very long.
Yeah. Ooh. Communist is going to communist.
And they believed that they were in danger. One principal even tried to convince his students not to participate, believing it would only end in bloodshed.
One college principal, sobbing with emotion, pleaded with his students not to join the march. There'll be bloodshed, he warned.
Unfortunately,
yeah, 'cause he watched it all happen prior. He knew. He was probably a history teacher.
a point of no return was fast approaching. On April 26, 1989, the People's Daily, a state-controlled outlet, published an editorial calling the protests a planned conspiracy to negate the leadership of the CCP and the socialist system. They also said People throughout the country must soberly recognize the fact that our country will have no peaceful days if this disturbance is not checked resolutely. So now we have students seeking dialogue now.
God, there's so much similarities that are going on in the world right now.
Being branded as conspirators. These are peaceful protesters. This only validates their argument entirely, I would say. While all of this is going on, international news coverage painted a bleak picture of the Chinese government. Officials remained split as to how to end the protests and see students return to their classes, which at this point were almost entirely empty. Hu Yaobang's successor, Zhao Ziyang, and his supporters argued that the government should negotiate with the students and address their legitimate complaints.
Address the peasants? How dare we? We're noble. Like I said, this is just monarchy with extra steps.
The hardliners, those opposed to any sort of negotiation, were led by Li Peng, the Chinese premier. Deng Xiaoping, the vice premier, who had been a close friend of Hu Yaobang as well as a guiding voice amidst the political turmoil, sided with the hardliners, fearing anarchy if protests were not suppressed. We had our absolute split here. Then things got worse for the Chinese government when 160 students began a hunger strike in Tiananmen Square only days before Gorbachev's arrival, and this number would only grow. And over the next 3 days, the number of hunger strikers rose to more than 3,000.
Which is a crazy thing, saying, like, I'm not going to eat until I get my way. It's a very childish thing to do, but Christ, it's effective.
Protesters filled the streets, preventing Gorbachev from reaching Tiananmen Square, where he was supposed to lay a wreath on the foot of the monument. You can probably imagine how humiliating this would be for the American government currently, but for the CCP, where it's such a tight-knit, controlled thing, and all the people watching are like, oh my God, I didn't realize we had no control over our people. This is crazy. I think I might go out there on the streets and start protesting. Oh my God. In the minds of the leaders of the CCP, something needed to be done, and it needed to be done immediately. And they set their eyes on Zhao, since he was a sympathizer. On May 19th, only 4 days after Gorbachev had arrived, Zhao Ziyang stepped out into the protest where he delivered a speech to students he tried to champion in the Communist Party in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. Here are some excerpts from a translation of the speech where we try to jump through while still representing the message truthfully. Students, we came too late. We are sorry. You talk about us, criticize us. It is all necessary.
Let's send out the guy that they actually like. Maybe he'll get them to leave and blah, blah, blah. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. This guy just turned into a puppet, and also this is a very creepy looking right there.
Now, the most important thing is to...
That just shows how light and old cameras make things look so much scarier.
In this strike, I feel that our communication is open. However, you should also know that the situation is very complicated. It's going to be a long process. Now, you're all about 20 and about to sacrifice your lives so easily, students. Couldn't you think rationally? The party and the nation is very antsy. Our society is very worried. If this situation loses control, it will have serious consequences. There are many things that can be solved. I hope that you will all end the hunger strike soon. Thank you. However, students did not stop their protests, and Zhao's favor in the Communist Party was completely spent. That night, Li Peng went on TV describing a state of disorder on the verge of chaos, and then stated that the army would be sent in to deal with the situation. It was announced...
Yes, turn the army against your own people. That always works. Hell, you can just not send the army against your own people, and the media will say that you are, and people still get up in arms.
That the army was surrounding Beijing, which wasn't to harm the students, but rather to protect the city. The protesters were to disperse if they didn't want to face consequences.
But at this time, they haven't done anything destructive other than to themselves. Like I said, there's a lot of protests that are, I'm going to do air quotes, peaceful, that, like, $2 million worth of damage a couple of summers ago.
Does that mean?
And they stopped counting?
I don't know. The hunger strike ended and was replaced with sit-down protests, but the army would try to mobilize and truck troops into the city with an estimated 300,000 soldiers. But instead of routing, something extraordinary happened. Beijing citizens flooded the streets, surrounded troop convoys, and pled with soldiers for 3 days. For those 3 days, the People's Army could not move through the people, being held
the People's Army against the people.
5 kilometers from the square, totally held back by the people of Beijing. Student protesters remained peaceful, but it was said that if a single drop of blood would shed, the whole country would rise up against the government. And on May 28th, Zhao Ziyang
They lied.
was placed under house arrest that would continue for 16 years until his death. Even his secretary was imprisoned. Clashes between students and police would become more frequent, though never outright bloody, as police tried to restrict students' movements and students would break through their human chains, and there was some pushing and shoving and fist fighting and things like that. Civilian blockades on military convoys and troop movements continued, even as the
It's actually pretty tame. Like, nothing's being thrown. They're just trying to force their way through it. Somewhat tame.
The dress and equipment of the army became more and more geared for bloodshed and battle. Caps were replaced with helmets, assault rifles were carried, tanks, T-54s were deployed, and troops were issued live ammunition. Everything was quickly coming to a head.
So the government's the aggressor. Again, communists are going to communism.
And wherever it was headed was not looking like the peaceful resolution the students wanted. Art students put a face to their demands. And on May 30th, 1989, after working through the night, the goddess of democracy was unveiled. It was a 33-foot statue that had been...
That is impressive. I'm sorry. They said they worked through the night and made that thing? Well done.
Erected in the likeness of the Statue of Liberty. The goddess symbolized freedom to the protesters, but was a clear threat to those in power. At this point, the government faced a choice that was no choice at all. If they let the students win, then they lose their monopoly and their power. The crowd was growing and their way of life was in jeopardy.
Chinese troops have fired tear gas at demonstrators and the crowds have fought back with rocks and bottles. At least 30 people have been injured in a series of clashes.
But through the night, escalation led to the army slaughtering their own countrymen.
Yep, there it is.
The military strength was estimated to be somewhere between 100 and 300,000 troops that had amassed in and around Beijing, which dropped the mask and opened fire on civilians, reportedly being ordered to...
God, like I'm actually shocked that the military guys did not change sides. Like, that's like the one thing they constantly say would happen. Like, oh, you think you should stand up to the military? Well, military agree with a lot of certain people, so.
Spare no one.
We're now getting reports of gunfire immediately to the south of Tiananmen Square.
At first, people couldn't believe what was happening. There was no way they were using real bullets to shoot at their own citizens, but as reality set in, panic spread and people ran for their lives. The 27th Army was responsible for recapturing Beijing from these student protests and responsible for these deaths. The soldiers carrying out the massacre were peasant soldiers from distant provinces.
So I'm saying, like, it's not like the soldiers were these super rich guys that it's like, were they jealous of the students?
27th Army, prior to being unleashed on protesters, had been isolated for 10 days. During this time, they had no idea how the protests were actually developing, as they'd been kept from the news. And they were told that they were conducting a military exercise, but the way it is described is horrific. Alan Donald's accounts of the dehumanization and brutality of the 27th Army make these PLA soldiers seem more like monsters than men. He communicated the horror through a secret diplomatic cable. Students understood they were given 1 hour to leave the square, but after 5 minutes, APCs attacked. Students linked arms but were mowed down, including soldiers. Then APCs ran over their bodies time and time again to make pie, and remains were collected by bulldozer. Remains were incinerated and then hosed down drains. 4 wounded girl students begged for their lives but were bayoneted. 1,000 survivors were told they could escape via Zhengyi Lu but were then mown down by specially prepared machine gun positions. And it says, adding that any ambulances trying to rescue the wounded were also attacked and their crews were killed. With medical crews...
Damn. Like, this is a crazy video to react to, and it's... I don't know how well this is going to do as a reaction, but I'm kind of happy I reacted to it, though. Because it just allows me to learn more, hate communism even more, and hopefully that someone who's watching this sees this and then hear what these whack job people are protesting and hoping for here, and open their damn eyes.
Dead, wounded drivers attempted to ram attackers but were blown to pieces with anti-tank weapons. Then in further attacks, APCs caught up with Shenyang military straggler trucks and rammed and overturned them and ran over troops. The 27th Army were so crazed and violent that they had even turned on other elements of the PLA, and detachments of troops from the Shenyang military region had been present in Beijing ever since the initial troop mobilization. And Shenyang troops were unarmed, initially tasked with dispersing crowds, but the 27th Army was sent in from all corners of the city after the Shenyang forces had failed to remove protesters peacefully. So when the 27th Army encountered Shenyang troops, the Shenyang trucks and their occupants were plowed through as these primitives, as Donald had described them.
Yeah, they're probably told, like, anybody in there is just against you.
Killed civilians and soldiers alike. In response to the violence, citizens erected barricades with what they could. Some set ablaze, while others fought back with Molotov cocktails. Soldiers and civilians alike died, though mostly civilians. Some of the soldiers that protesters managed to best were even burned alive, and vehicles were damaged and set on fire. Some claims report over 1,200 vehicles were damaged, including 1,000 military trucks, 60 armored cars, 30 police cars, 120 public buses, and 70 just regular motor vehicles. By 1 a.m., the PLA had reached Tiananmen Square, where thousands of students were still gathered. But this time, they were ordered to not open fire, but instead told students that they must clear the square by 6 a.m. with no exceptions. The student leaders...
Yeah, because they are give it up to the Tiananmen Square, like, protesters. They've made their bed, they stuck to their guns, and they were going to see it through.
Put the decision to a vote. Would they stay or would they leave? Reportedly, the stay votes had actually been superior in number, but student leader Feng Chengde claimed that the votes to go had won and the students vacated the square. But this was not the end. Later in the morning, citizens...
Also, not going to say he made a tough call. If he made a tough call and he saves a few people's lives by choosing to leave, good job on that guy.
Started leaving their homes and returning to the square. Speculation suggests that these were parents of student protesters, presumably in search of their children who didn't return home that night, and the gathering crowd was a fraction of the size of the original protest, maybe 50 people, but they'd been yelling at troops and carefree bloodshed. Journalist Jan Wong recalls how 2 lines of troops raised their rifles, took aim, and when the crowds began fleeing, they were shot in their backs.
After a while, I noticed that the commander, the officer in charge of these 2 rows of soldiers, gave them an order, and they raised their rifles and they took aim. And when they raised their rifles, the group of people in the corner started running, and they, of course, didn't run towards the square. They ran away from the square, which is just past the hotel. So as they ran, I expected, okay, so that's the end of that. It wasn't. The soldiers started shooting.
Like I said, that's even crazier with all this stuff that's going on. We have video evidence of all this.
And they shot them in the backs as they were running. Some of them fell right in front of me.
People who tried to assist the wounded were shot as well. Through the day, this would happen several times. Time would pass, people would venture back out of shelter again, and the army would raise their guns. The people would flee, they'd be shot down, and rinse and repeat from morning until late afternoon over half a dozen times. Now, the total number of dead as a result of the crackdown in Tiananmen Square varies wildly. The Chinese Red Cross initially reported that approximately...
Oh, the Red Cross didn't lie. I'm going to go with the government did.
Approximately 2,600 people had been killed with 7,000 wounded, but the statement was retracted after pressure from the government. The number...
Oh, the Chinese government forcing numbers to change. Huh. Never seen that recently.
Was probably way higher than that also. By the way, that statement that was redacted also just addressed those who had been transported to hospitals and didn't include those still laying in the streets, according to a telegram that was classified by the U.S. State Department. When the Chinese government put out an official number, one that should absolutely be believed as fact, they said that only 241 deaths had resulted.
No.
With 36 of those being university students. The number is obviously far higher than that. You can imagine the official reported number is contradicted by several accounts. A support group for mothers who lost children in the massacre called Tiananmen Mothers shared that they'd confirmed the bodies of 71 students had been recovered. Meanwhile,
only 71? That's crazy.
While Tan Yunhe, the secretary of the party leadership group and vice president of the Chinese Red Cross, reportedly told a senior editor of PLA Literature and Art that he'd examined the bodies of 727 people, 713 of which had been local students and civilians. Alan Donald, the British guy who reported some of the atrocities, believed the minimum number of civilians dead to be at least 10,000. On June...
Damn, 10,000.
5th, 1989, the image that would come to represent the Tiananmen Square incident was captured by Stuart Franklin. One man stood in the path of at least 9 T-59s, which perfectly encapsulates what the entire protests had been about and how the Chinese Communist Party would respond to ideological threats. Peaceful protests will be met with military might. You cannot think or do if it is not in accordance with our law. Tank Man was unarmed. He was alone.
And that's sad, still a thing going on in China. I don't care. I'm never going to China.
He wasn't a threat, and neither were the thousands of other protesters that Chinese leaders had decided to murder for simply wanting an open dialogue for real change. So once again, and very recently, the Communist Party that claimed to represent workers and peasants killed workers and peasants and students to maintain power. And
like I said, could you imagine that timeline shift? Like, these college kids succeeded, and then they restructured China to look more like the United States, and just went on from there. Probably there's so much less bloodshed in the world, to be all honest.
Prevent them from thinking. As a result of all of this, any party members championing reform from this point on were ousted and arrested because it causes
Yeah, no shock there.
unrest. Economic reform was paused, political reform was shelved permanently, and the CCP entrenched itself, further suppressing any opposition to maintain its monopoly on power. They would also present a face of unity at all times, hiding differing opinions and factions to those outside the party so no one could see the cracks that were clearly and obviously there, and they murdered a ton of students because of it. There was
Did set back their country and never changed.
still pressure being applied to China to even recognize the atrocity for what it was now almost 40 years later. China wants everyone to forget what happened in
What's extra scary is all those students now would be in their 60s. And high-ranking officials. And they're still going down the same path that they were going down.
Tiananmen Square. They don't want it to be an open discussion, and any open discussion of it is punished. In 2021, a human rights lawyer and activist named Chao Hang-tung was helping to organize a peaceful remembrance of the massacre. She simply encouraged people to light candles at their home, but to remember the crackdown is to endanger national.
Oh, well, at least she did the smart thing of saying at your home. She didn't try to say, hey, go out in public, but she did tell people, you know, to think and show signs of expression.
Security. What's crazy is how differently things were progressing in Europe the same year as the Tiananmen Square massacre. In Berlin, 5 months after Tiananmen, the wall came down. Not with tanks, but with hammers, champagne, and tears of joy, and the delicious capitalist treats in grocery stores. East Germans flooded west. The event was celebrated with cheers and fireworks.
Yeah, like I said, you imagine if that timeline shift, the Soviet Union collapses, the Berlin Wall comes down, China restructures themselves to be more freedom-based.
The same year that we...
Listen, China became more freedom-based, and the United States' its biggest ally. Because that could have happened. Then Russia started acting like the way it did, and North Korea, like Vietnam, it's like all those things, all those countries over there that are basically mini communist countries. If they had like capitalist China right there, and they were like, no, you're not doing this. We saw this and failed.
We saw China choose mass repression. We saw Eastern Europe choose freedom. Poland elected its first non-communist government. Hungary adopted a new constitution allowing
Czechoslovakia split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia.
Multi-party elections, and Czechoslovakia's Velvet Revolution toppled communism without firing a single shot. Then this Romanian guy, who I can't even say his name, who ordered soldiers to fire on protesters, faced a firing squad himself on Christmas Day. And by 1991, the Soviet Union, the revolution's birthplace, dissolved entirely. But China watched and learned the opposite lesson. Never show weakness, never allow organized opposition, never let the dominoes start falling. And today we see how that lesson manifests in censorship and control in the digital era. We have the Great Firewall, which is the world's most sophisticated internet censorship apparatus in China.
I know there's like countries over there, they're only allowed like a certain number of hours on the internet, like per day.
200,000 block
Or per week.
domains, 100,000.
No, I think it's per day, 'cause I think a lot of the gamers will start gaming at like, so their hours would run out just after midnight and kick back up, so they want to do like long raids.
Plus websites forbidden, including Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. The Great Firewall doesn't just block, it shapes reality for the people in China. But they definitely get around it. They definitely have access, but there's nothing that they can do. And maybe they don't want to do anything. Maybe the system is fine enough for now. I don't think there's massive atrocities, aside from what they're doing to the Uyghurs. Of course.
Yeah. The Muslims that live in China are not happy.
it's a genocide as well. But anyways, as everybody knows, you can't be critical of anything that the government of China doesn't want you to be critical of. You can't be critical of
Yeah, they banned Winnie the Pooh because someone said their leader looked like it.
Xi Jinping. You can't call him Winnie the Pooh. That's forbidden. You can't say he looks like Winnie the Pooh. And then, you know how mean people are to Donald Trump? We just get away with it, dude.
Dude, you imagine like half the stuff people say about Trump in a country like that?
You could just be like, oh, he's an FBI informant. He's also a pedophile, probably. I don't know. I'd be drone struck if I said that in China. You get hit by a fucking drone.
No, someone just walk up to his house and burn it down with him inside of it.
Or something, probably, maybe. Or something like that. China's also a police and surveillance state. I mean, look at what happened during COVID in China. People just being I mean, it should happen in Australia as well, but half of the world's surveillance cameras are in China, and they watch China's streets. That's 1 for every 7 citizens. The Chinese state monitors every single step that you take, every single word that you utter, and every glance you peek. Facial recognition tracks your movement, and purchases, associations, biometric databases collect your fingerprints, blood samples, voice prints, and even...
Yep, that's the route that there's some people in this country want to take.
Iris scans. Airports, hotels, banks, even public toilets have facial recognition scanners. Phones can be searched for unauthorized content, like calling President Xi Jinping a f***ing Winnie.
Watching a pro-capitalist YouTuber who says, fuck China.
The Pooh, ugly f***, or whatever the fuck. Devices can be scraped for data remotely, and police can analyze it. And
remotely.
There's a social credit system that ensures the untrustworthy are unable to move a single step. That's a real quote. For 30 years, Hong Kong was the only soil in China where there is any level of freedom allowed. And during those 30 years, Hong Kong also held the only Tiananmen vigil on Chinese soil, with tens of thousands gathered to keep the memory alive. That too ended when the national security law ended Hong Kong's freedom, and the vigil was banned, though.
Yeah, because Hong Kong was being controlled by England, I think. And then they said after a certain amount of time, it would go back, but Hong Kong was not happy.
Thousands would defy the ban and face arrest in favor of standing against oppression. This year marks 36 years since Tiananmen, and in Beijing, the square will be filled with tourists taking selfies unaware of the blood beneath their feet. So yeah, anyways, I'm gonna be honest, a lot of this stuff seems familiar, okay guys? Seems like we're moving towards this. Not that it's communist or anything like that, not like there's gonna be any sort of, freedom of that level, but the whole surveillance state, the whole authoritarianism, the whole Palantir thing, the whole, you can't say anything bad about the leaders.
God, that was Twitter about 7 years ago. Twitch somewhat now. YouTube about 5 years ago.
They'll put you in jail. And you can still say stuff bad about the leaders, but there are certain entities adjacent to our leaders that are foreign that you can't say anything bad about, at least in the state that I'm in, the state of Texas, where I run a business and employ people and actually try to do a good job as best I possibly can. I can't say anything bad about them, or I cannot do business with the government of Texas. What is this, communist China? What is this, communist China? What about the freedom of speech upheld by the Second Amendment, which is to fucking shoot people who are bad, who aren't allowing you to use the First Amendment? What? Anyways.
I did not know Texas was like that.
Thanks for watching. Go to the Gump Club, go to sour.gg, check out the Too Late Show for a little extra video. All right, guys? TLS uploading there on a regular basis. Check out everything else we got going on. Instagram, Twitter, all that shit. Sour Boys is my magnum opus. I absolutely love the candy company. I love the brand. We have a mobile game coming. I built a mobile game.
I did not know he had a mobile game.
In Unity. It's like a ripoff of Subway Surfers, but it's like our little characters and it's fun. Hopefully you guys will like that. Anyways, thanks for watching. This just did.
God dang, it's like I knew communist was bad, but I didn't think it was like, I knew it was bad, but it's like hearing all that stuff in real time is just crazy. Like I said, just imagine the alternate history where that Tiananmen Square was the catalyst to changing China. Essentially says we the United States, kind of like working with them to make them have a similar system as us, where the citizens had freedom of speech, freedom of the freedom of like of arms, like freedom of religion, like how much that would have changed the world. Because like I said, if the United States and China were all on the same page, and then you had the issues of Vietnam, the United States probably would not have gotten involved as much because China being there, being like, hey, knock that off. Korea, same thing. You figure because the United States drove the communists almost all the way to China, if that still happened, China would have been sitting there like, we make a sandwich. Yeah, we would have one Korea right now. That's crazy. But that's it. Like I said, I don't know if these Oompa long-winded, more learned videos are going to be the way to go in the future. But I figured I'd give it a try because I said I was going to do a second Oompa video, and this one caught my interest, especially on the day of recording is election day in my state and a lot of states. Hopefully, I gotta hold on. We gotta do something. It is election day. Wait, where is it? Oh, I got rid of it. Nope, there it is. I thought I got rid of it. Hopefully. Brandon won in Texas. Who knows? But that's it. That's really all I have. I might be live tonight. I still haven't decided what game I'm playing Tuesday night, rather than Wednesday night. But that's it. That's all I have. I'll see you weird people later.